Welcome to Ridiculous. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. I hope you are living your best life. Loveshack.org. Wife cheated 23 years ago. Just found out. My D-Day was 5 weeks ago, and I have been riding an emotional roller coaster ever since. My wife and I have been together for 23 years. We are both in our early 60s and were both married before. We were married 5 months after being introduced to each other by one of her sisters. Over the years, we have had a few challenges, but we stayed strong together and have gotten through them. Our relationship has strengthened over the years, and we are now extremely close empty nesters who spend a lot of time together and have quite an active, satisfying sex life. She was 37 and I was 40 when we married, so we each knew that the other had a romantic and sexual history. And that has never been an issue. Over the years, we have shared stories about our histories with each other from time to time, but that has always been voluntary, and neither of us ever asked the other the question, "How many people have you been with?" or details of the other's formal sexual activities. For some reason, starting about 2 months ago, we really began to open up to each other in casual conversations regarding previous relationships and sex partners. My wife in particular seemed to have a need to tell me everything she could think about herself in this regard. I found a lot of it quite interesting and entertaining. She had some funny stories to tell, and some of it was even a turn on. This sharing of stories went for a couple of weeks until a Saturday morning when she was doing her hair at the dressing table and I was lying on the bed chatting with her. She finished telling me something and then said, "Well, I think I've told you everything about my past. I think you probably know more about me than anyone but me." I could see her face in the mirror of the dressing table, and of course she could see me too. I gave sort of a chuckle and said half jokingly, "So you've never cheated on me?" Her face dropped and her eyes looked away, and she sort of muttered, "I can't answer that." Then she said, "But I can't lie to you either." What she related next drove a spear through my heart and destroyed the 23 years of security that had built up for me in our relationship. Her story. A couple of months ago, after we were married, she had to fly to Florida, where she had previously lived, for a custody hearing with her ex. She was very nervous and scared about this hearing, and she was representing herself before the court, and he had hired a pretty high-powered attorney. The plan was for her to fly down on the day before the hearing, spend a night in a motel, get up and go to the hearing early the next day, then fly back home that evening. When the day arrived, she landed in Florida, she picked up a rental car, drove to the motel and checked in. She had purposely reserved a room at a motel near a nice beach she used to visit when she was married to her ex. My wife loves to walk on beaches. They are a source of peace and calm for her. This day, she stopped at a liquor store on the way to the beach because she was a nervous wreck because of the hearing the next day, and she thought a little rum would calm things down. She wasn't a teetotaler, but she wasn't a big drinker either. She spent a couple hours walking on the beach and drinking her rum, and she realized at some point that she had a pretty good buzz on. She remembered a cute small diner she had seen not far from the motel and decided to go there and get something to eat. When she entered the diner, it was nearly empty and she seated herself alone in a booth. A bit later, a man she describes as good looking with salt and pepper hair came in. She thinks he was probably about 40 years old. He sat in an empty booth facing her and they exchanged greetings. As they sat there eating, they struck up a conversation. He seemed like a very nice guy and she learned that he was a professional photographer who really enjoyed his work. As they talked, he asked if he could join her in the booth. She says she didn't see any harm in this. I told her I would have been seeing red flags all over the place at that point, but she felt he was harmless and she was enjoying having someone who seemed nice to talk to rather than heading immediately back to her hotel room and sitting there alone thinking about the next day. I should point out that my wife is a very trusting person when it comes to people and always thinks the best of them rather than the worst. After some conversation, he asked her if she would like to follow him home and see some of his photography work. She claims to not know why to this day, but she said yes. She followed him to his house, where he poured wine for both of them and began showing her his work. By now, I would have had a pretty good idea of what he really wanted to show me. And like the word photography, it also starts with the letter P. But she says she just wasn't thinking about that, and definitely did not follow him to his house with the idea of having sex with him. I will spare most of the details, but she ended up in bed with him. She remembers that they drank a lot of wine. She's not using that as an excuse, and at some point he began to kiss her and fondle her. Somewhere along the way, he suggested that they take a shower, and she thinks he may have been trying to sober her and himself up, because she seems to remember that they were quite drunk and the shower water was cool and cold. Once they got to his bed, she claims that he was too drunk to maintain a complete erection, so he couldn't get it in. Whether that's true or not, or whether she is just sparing me that detail, I probably will never know. She has admitted, however, that he had his hands all over her and she did some oral to him. So she is probably telling the truth. The mind movies have been murder. She says she realized by the time they got to his bedroom that she was doing something very wrong, and she thought about backing out, but he had gotten pretty aggressive, and she realized that she didn't really know this man at all, so decided to just give him what he wanted and get it over with. She says he fell asleep soon after and began snoring loudly, at which point she got off the bed quietly, got dressed, and left the house without awakening him. She says she cried on the drive back to the motel, and when she got there she was feeling dirty, so spent a long time in the shower trying to get clean and crying. I know from the reading I've been doing that some betrayed spouses don't want to know the details and some have a need to know everything. I'm in the second category. I have asked a bazillion questions. Some things she simply does not remember due to the passage of time, but since she initially told me about this, she has been completely willing to answer any question she could. I know that many of the questions have been very painful for her to answer, and the answers have been painful for me to hear, but she has totally acknowledged my need and right to ask them and has been very patient in trying to answer everything. She has apologized repeatedly and wants to work at rebuilding my trust in our marriage. She has told me that even though she doesn't think of the incident often anymore, it bothered her terribly for a long time, and anytime it popped up into her head, she wanted to tell me but didn't want to hurt me. She said when I asked her directly that morning 5 weeks ago whether she had ever cheated on me, she couldn't lie about it. She swears she has never done anything like this again, and I have no reason not to believe her. She has never given me any reason to suspect that anything has been going on since then. She has told me repeatedly that she owns the dirt and makes no excuses. Even though this happened over 20 years ago, that does not lessen incredible surprise, pain, anger, and disappointment I have been experiencing. When she told me about it, it might as well have happened the previous evening. She understands that even though she has had 20 plus years of knowing this, it is fresh and raw for me. As I said earlier, the mind movies have been horrible. Although they probably only show up about 8 or 10 times a day now, rather than once every 3 minutes, which it seemed they did at first, I read somewhere else here how the sex part is the hardest part for a man to get over when his wife cheats on him. I truly believe that, since the sex part was pretty much the only part of my wife's one-night fling. She says it was not even satisfying for her, as I guess she was pretty selfish and one way. I just wish she could tell me why she did it, but she can't. I think if she told me that she saw this guy and was incredibly attracted to him, so she just decided since she was far from home and would never see him again, that she was just going to screw him, I could understand. But she claims sincerely that she had no intention of having anything to do with him sexually when she went to his house. She's pretty sure the booze had a lot to do with it, but emphasizes that she does not want to use that as an excuse, that what she did was wrong, whether she was drunk or not. In a strange way, I feel lucky when I compare my story to those of some others here. My wife had a one-night stand with a guy 1,200 miles from where we live. She did not carry an ongoing affair with him, and there was no emotional attachment. She never had any further contact with him. She cannot explain why she did what she did, but makes no excuses for it. She says it is not something she did before or has done since. I love her very much, as I know she does me. We have 23 years of good history together, and we are committed to moving forward and working together to make a marriage and relationship that is changed forever, better and stronger than it ever was. She tells me often how sorry she is, and she lets me know several times a day how much she loves me. I had decided that I would not forgive her, and until I truly felt forgiveness in my heart. And I was able to forgive her sincerely a couple of weeks after D-Day. I know that she knows that what she did was very wrong, and I know that she regrets it terribly and would take it back in a minute if she could. I also know that she truly gets how much she hurt me and that I will never forget. I'm just writing this because I really don't have anyone I can talk to about it, but felt like I needed to share it with someone. By the way, she beat the high-powered lawyer and won the custody battle.